welcome again to Disruption Drive, your front row seat to the future of mobility. I'm your host, Hari Sripathi. For 10,000 years, the cutting edge of our civilization has been tiny seeds with the promise of food sunk into the earth. Farming is our oldest technology. It is the engine that created our calendars, our cultures, and our very survival. We stand today at the very beginning of a similar revolution, a digital revolution that promises to change the landscape of the earth as profoundly as that first plow. My guest today is perhaps the most strategic operator in that world of automation, and he bridges these two seemingly impossible worlds. I could introduce him simply as a unique, qualified veteran of the trenches of Silicon Valley, since he has worked directly for the most famous and impactful architects of our modern era, including Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Michael Dell. But Tim is more than that. Tim happens to be a sixth-generation farmer who carries the weight of agricultural heritage in his blood. Tim Bucher is now the CEO of Agtonomy and is building the robots that will drive the farms of tomorrow. Tim, welcome to the show. And I wanted to start with a fundamental premise. Is the farm the foremost frontier of automation? And in other words, is a farm just more ready for what we call today as physical AI than, say, the road or the factory?
Yeah, great question. And first of all, Harry, it's great to be with you. So thanks for having me on. I would say the farm is not at the foremost frontier where technology is advancing the most. But I will tell you this, it is one of the industrial markets that is in most desperate need for technology. We are very challenged in agriculture these days. One of the main reasons is nobody wants to go into that industry, right? I have a farm, as you mentioned, I'm a sixth-generation farmer. My brother as well, and we both have three children, and none of our children are taking over our respective farms. So it's created a big challenge when it comes to the evolution, the continuation, if you will, of the farms of today and of the future. So it's an environment, it's an industry that is ripe for change. And the only way out, as something I learned from one of the people you mentioned I worked for, Steve Jobs, is the only way out of this is to innovate our way out. And I think growers all over the world, whether they're row crop growers or small growers or permanent crop growers, they're all embracing it more than ever. So the time is right for automation.
I want to ask you, I want to flip the question on AI itself, because we could always talk about, is the AI ready for a farm? But how does the farm change as automation becomes easier? And I want to ask you a very specific question, because you mentioned all farms of all varying different sizes. The vast majority of farmers tend to actually be independent, small even, several times. Does it actually further create a bias towards enterprise-grade farms that are just large and can afford sort of automation?
Yeah, I would say that it starts with the enterprise growers. Just like any new kind of technology, it's typically embraced by the corporations who might be more willing to take the chance to do something different. They might have the capital to do that as well. And so the reality is, it is the enterprise growers who are leading the way. And it's also important for startups too, because startups who, they have limited resources, as I'm sure your listeners know. And so when you have limited resources, you have to make sure you pick, customers who have the resources and who really have the ability to kind of partner along what may be at times a bumpy road. Whereas, the smaller growers cannot afford that at all, just given how even more limited their resources are. It's sort of a pyramid where you start with the enterprise growers and you end up with the smaller growers, where even my own farming operation, I would classify in the lower end of the pyramid, but it will get there. And that's the exciting part. And as I said earlier, all layers of that pyramid are desperate for.
But I don't want to call you a hobbyist. You're a sixth-generation farmer, so you know a thing or two about farming. But
Yep.
of course, you're a Silicon Valley veteran. You know a thing or two about automation, and you do it. The average farmer who's at least small has none of that. They're working day to day, tilling the fields, if you may. How do they then actually take advantage of automation? Because the enterprise, fair enough, they're spending they could afford to spend a large amount of money and make a business case for an automation and really call it labor savings. But a family farm, maybe a larger family farm even, how do they make a similar business case?
Well, first of all, every farmer in the world, whether they're in Asia or US or anywhere, all use and depend on smartphones and applications every day. And so you can't provide a solution that is complicated, even for the enterprise growers. You have to make it simple, and that will then start the adoption. But one thing we realized, and I realized as a grower, is you can't really trust startups to create solutions because you're very familiar with certain brands that have been out there for over 100 years, who create incredible equipment at the most cost-effective price, have the dealer network for service and parts that is really important, and that can even give financing. Right? They all have the tier one, the top level global equipment manufacturers all have their own banks too. And so one of the ways to provide traction and to provide solutions that can be afforded by everyone is to partner with those OEMs. So Agtonomy has taken a very different approach. Like, we don't actually build tractors. We don't build retrofit kits that go on tractors. We work with those global manufacturers who are trusted by all growers, of enterprise to, the mom and pops, and bring cost-effective solutions to market that way. And so that makes the solutions easier to adopt from the user experience perspective, right? If you can do everything from your smartphone, with a simple application, and you get a cost-effective piece of equipment that has reliability that these companies, whether it's Kubota or Bobcat or others, can provide. And I think that's a recipe for success for everyone in the stack of, where you're at in the farmer stack.
Yeah, you're not, spending your time earning a customer trust that is very distributed, in the agricultural community, but
Yep.
you're working with an existing player, of course, and that therefore your business case is that much easier to make. But let me ask you a question on the value layer, because you mentioned there's the power in this industry belongs to some of those legacy players, who have been producing, like the Bobcats and of course the John Deere's potentially of the world. What does the value layer look like for agricultural and automation? And I want to start with, there's the land and the irrigation, crops and soil, but there's also the machine, the spare parts, the hardware, the software, and the ecosystem that you mentioned, the financing, the delivery, the dealerships, and the spare parts as well. But how is automation changing that?
So the one thing that I alluded to earlier is this vanishing workforce. In the United States now, the average age of a farmer is nearly 60 years old. In Japan, it's nearly 70 years old. In other parts, it's even higher in other parts of the world. That's the average age. So one of the things that all farmers are struggling with today, and one of the things that's most expensive for them today, is getting the work done. Right? So there's, all kinds of data companies and data analytics companies, and they're all good and they're all wonderful. And those are, can be multi-billion-dollar companies. But the real value is this multi-trillion dollar opportunity of getting the work done. And
Yeah.
so if you can create solutions that can essentially clone the skilled labor that already exists in farms, because it's hard for them to hire folks, and certainly with immigration policies that have changed recently, it's become even harder in countries like the United States. That yields the greatest value for these farmers, right? So if you have, for example, a weather front coming in and you have to get the spray done before that weather front comes in, and you only have 3 days to do it, and you need 5 people, but you only have one, well, if you can have that one person manage, a fleet of 5 tractors to, get that
Yeah.
spray done before the rains come in or whatever that weather front is, that's incredibly valuable, because now you've saved whatever the percentages of yield that you might have lost due to that, event. And so it's really a game-changing value that you bring with these autonomous solutions that not just, drive tractors around, they actually get the work done. So nobody goes tractoring. People go and they do sprays or mowing or disking or seeding or any of these other kinds of tasks. And that's the key, is can you help growers get the work done? And that's all Agtonomy focuses on.
Absolutely. But I want to sharpen the pencil on that very topic as well. But let me ask you a question that relates to your Silicon Valley background. I see automation as, sort of it's a once in a really human civilizational issue, but you've worked for three very different founders with three very different philosophies. And just to, sort of paraphrase, Steve Jobs was all about, and maybe the first boss you had was Bill Gates, who was, look, let's build the best technology out there, possibly leading with software, but technological leaps. And Steve Jobs was all about usability, design, interfaces. And Michael Dell was, cost efficiency and operational efficiency. Now you're effectively promising all three. You're obviously a leap in technology. This has never been done before. You're also a leap in usability because now you're training people who are not traditionally they're of course smartphone. They know how to use smartphones, but they need this to be they're not there. They don't know how to use advanced robots, but you're also promising labor cost savings. So you're doing all three, but you're a startup. How do you break these trade-offs?
Yeah, great question. And Hari, it's really cool that you picked up on those three former bosses of mine because when I talk about my life in Silicon Valley, I talk about those three individuals quite a bit. And I mentioned that with Bill Gates, it was all about software. With Michael Dell, it was all about costs. And with Steve Jobs, it was all about design. So how can we as a small startup provide all three?
Is it even possible, or do we have to
It,
make
it
now?
is. It is possible, and it's possible via partnerships. So the cost one is a really big pillar, right? I mean, that's really big for growers today. And that's where, working with these global tier one, highly respected and trusted brands come into play, right? Because if we were to build equipment, the cost would be much higher. We wouldn't have distribution. We wouldn't have parts and service from day one. And we certainly couldn't finance it to make the cash flow work, right?
Right.
I mean, for those of your listeners who don't know, in agriculture and even in construction, these companies have their own banks, just like Dell. And I learned this from Michael, by the way. And that allows the grower to get very attractive financing. The farmer can get tractors for sometimes 0% interest for extended periods of time.
And I want to
So
make a
we,
small point here. The
yep,
invention of banking was fundamentally actually originally to provide farmers to buy crops. So actually, in part of
exactly.
so that's
Yep,
a very
yep.
important point. Financing exists because of agriculture.
That's right. That's right. And a lot of people don't realize, like startups don't realize, oh yeah, I'm a Silicon Valley bro or a Silicon Valley sis, and I'm going to create a solution that's good for farmers. But they don't understand those three pillars that I mentioned, which one of them is banking, their own banks, right? Whether it's Kubota Credit Corporation or, John Deere Credit or whatever, CNH Capital, et cetera. But that dealer network as well for the parts and service. And then of course the incredible design and reliability of the equipment. And so, the cost equation, I believe, is satisfied to an incredible degree by partners that we work with. I think the software and the design part is where we really focus, and they go hand in hand. Because as I mentioned, everybody has a smartphone. And if you can create a solution that's as easy to use as applications everybody in the world uses every day, you've hit a home run. So we've got the hardware with our partners, we got the distribution, et cetera. All that Autonomy has to focus on is making the user experience really simple and ensuring that we can create the reliability in the autonomy stack that is required for these industries. And we have a head start on that one because of the billions, if not trillions, that have been invested in self-driving cars and that sexy area of old, which took a lot longer than everybody had anticipated. But today I
Still
have a
taking a
full
while.
self-driving car, right? And I can take Waymos in San Francisco. We're even on the freeways now. So that has been a sort of a tectonic shift, if you will, in technology that we just are embracing and bringing to in these industrial markets that are in much more desperate need than, for example, a self-driving car, right? Because I have alternatives. The self-driving car is a service of convenience. But what we're building are services of necessity, right? To keep the global society fed, to feed the world, build the world, move the world. We need these industrial foundational pieces for our existence. And that's what we're focused on.
Absolutely. And now you mentioned that, your real focus is to clone skilled labor. But let me ask you, those farm worker of tomorrow now, has to be an AI operator, so maybe engineer, maybe an orchestrator. There's various different words being thrown out there. This may be a person who's into video gaming who just needs to know the technicalities of operating a fleet. But what does that job of tomorrow look like on the farm?
Yeah. So
The other
a
way
lot
is
of
how
people,
much are you cloning and what
yeah,
remains?
yeah, a lot of people ask me, well, does the farmer have to be a programmer now? And when I show them the user experience, they realize, wait, it's just a configuration, just like you would physically. So, for example, this morning I did a job. We have a farm here in South San Francisco. It's literally a couple, I don't know, 100 yards away from where I'm at right now, at our headquarters here. And when I set up a job, I'm basically, clicking on buttons that say, I want to do this area and I want to mow. And I select the implement and I select the RPMs, the rotations per minute that that implement, like a mower, needs to run at. And then I hit go. And so it's not really, oh, and then I get to watch it, my smartphone. And basically, I can take that job that I'm setting up, and before I hit go, I can even say, yeah, and split that job across these 10 vehicles. And now those jobs go across those 10 vehicles, and I'm basically just the conductor of the orchestra, if you will. So I've done the configuration with a few clicks. Then I hit start and it splits it across my fleet. And then I'm monitoring it. And the monitoring doesn't have to be looking at your smartphone all the time. This morning, I actually put my smartphone in my pocket. And I had one of my colleagues go out in front of the vehicle to show that what happens when it encounters something like, an animal or a tree or whatever in front of it, and I got a push notification. So I feel the vibration, I bring it up, it shows me a picture of it, and it says, what do you want to do? And I can just say bypass and continue on through it because it might be a spider web, something that's organic that you can push through. And then our models learn that. And so a lot of people think it's very technical, and it's not. It's more about configuring, and it's really about like playing the simulation game of Farmville. I always use this as an analog. It's really Farmville for real. And the coolest part of what we're doing and what's happened with our customers is this is now attracting a younger generation to the point where some of our customers don't even put ads out there for tractor operators, but they put ads out there for tech operators with video game experience as a desired, part of the job description. And it's amazing because now you have folks that are in their 20s that don't want to be in the 110-degree heat and dust and dirt because these are, difficult jobs, but they can be in the air conditioned Ford F-150 pickup truck being the conductor of this symphony that's working out there while they can do other things too, right? Do administrative work or plan the next jobs on the application. The farm worker of the future is not, it's not what it is today. And that's actually good news because for your listeners, farming is hard. It is incredibly hard work. It is very taxing on the body. I mean, think about being on a piece of equipment for 12 hours a day. The country of
Probably bent
Brazil, yeah, bent over, right? By the end of the day, you are spent. And there are new regulations, even in countries like Brazil, where we've recognized that vibrating the human body continuously is very, very hazardous. Blood clots and other kinds of things. So there's this stuff called whole body vibration, where you are required to limit that to your employees. Otherwise, you have to pay an additional hazard pay. So, the farm worker of the future is going to be much healthier, much safer, and enjoy life more. Did you know that when I grew up, my family never, ever in my life took a family vacation together? We couldn't. We always had to have someone back on the farm. And now we had livestock, which, added to that challenge because they don't take a break, right?
You don't want to be
But
playing plow, but fair enough.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. No. So, you're going to have a better quality life. It's going to be a lot more fun because you're basically watching this, orchestra do its work, and you're getting all this data afterwards that kind of shows you how efficient it was. You're using the data analytics to tell you when to do the jobs, but you don't have to, you know, actually guess anymore, if you will. That's kind of the whole work loop of the future. So we know of AI agents today that we use for all kinds of things, but really the farm agent of the future is going to enable the farmer to be able to hit the easy button so much more than they do today. And that's our goal. That's our mission. Solve the labor challenges, but also make the quality of life of those who are in agriculture that much better. And we feel that's very important.
And on the question of quality of life, I did want to sort of maybe circle back to one of our earlier premise, which was, agriculture has existed for 10,000 years, possibly more, starting with an ancient Sumer, as far as we know. it is defined, what is called generational wisdom, what is cultural identity today. It's of course increasingly sort of becoming this black box of AI and robots, of course, in very early days. But what does, you've mentioned, look, quality of life, health, the ability to take vacations will possibly improve for the jobs of the future. But what does it do to our social contract when we lose that connection to the soil? And how do you think communities will have to define themselves going forward? Because 99% of us were the descendants of agrarian communities.
You know, I don't think it changes much because we still are grounded in agriculture. You can't get away from agriculture no matter how you paradigm shift the jobs, the resources you have. So I don't think it's going to detract from that kind of grounding, that true sort of ag DNA, that saying, that song that the people have, said for many, many decades of, you can take the person out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the person. That will remain because you're still going to need those rural settings to grow the food. Sure, there's some vertical growing opportunities, but that cannot feed the world. We believe in bringing technology to the crops, not crops to the technology. And Mother Nature still has a chance here. And it's the only way we can really scale the level of food production that we need for the global society. So I think there's always going to be that grounding in agriculture. It's just the tools are different, but the community is still going to respect it the way the community does today and still rally around it today. I mean, again, think about these rural settings where these farms are. There's lots of farmer neighbors, right? And that community will continue to exist. And here's the greatest thing about the community that has existed forever. Farmers share a lot, right? Things that work really well, they share. It's like the internet, but faster. News spreads very fast, right? And things that don't work are shared. And if, farmer over here has a challenge with a certain piece of equipment, I won't name any names, of course, but that equipment almost takes generations to get back into that family again, on that trust level, right? So because of that tremendous trust that exists between farmers and equipment manufacturers, between, the communities together, that's never going to be broken, in my opinion. It's just that the tools are going to make it even easier for them to get their work done and to ultimately feed the world.
Well, as we wrap up, the mission remains the same. As we stay grounded to the land, we continue to make the earth provide while keeping our connection to it intact. If the last 10,000 years of agriculture were defined by the human hand on the plow, it feels like, Tim, you're saying that next 10,000 will be defined by how we code that wisdom into the machines, but keep ourselves grounded to the land. So a huge thank you to Tim Bucher for showing us that black box of AI does not have to be a wall. It can be a tool as vital as any tractor or seed. And for all of you who are listening, this has been Disruption Drive. My name is Hari Sripati, and until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon, but your feet firmly in the soil. Thank you once again. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you.